Welcome, everybody. My name is Celine Figueroa, and on behalf of the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, I'd like to say welcome to tonight's program. This light is throwing me off a little bit. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science is pleased to partner with the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management and the Denver Indian Commission to present Indigenous film. This film was brought in right as the Stonehenge exhibit closed. And while the Stonehenge itself was a human-made sacred landscape, this film features a natural sacred stone landscape. And I think we'll all really get to connect with it as its own geographic feature. As you're watching tonight's presentation, please put your questions and comments in the chat. We'll be watching the chat throughout the event. It's how you'll be able to communicate with us. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. To begin tonight's event, I'd like to introduce Rafael Maldonado Bad Hand from the Denver American Indian Commission. Rafael is a comic book artist and a representative from the commission. Welcome, Rafael.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, it's still getting used to this whole Zoom thing. So I'm part of the Denver American Indian Commission, one of the commissioners there, been there for a couple of years now. So we are proud to be partnered with everybody here, especially with the Indigenous Film Festival. So hopefully you enjoy the film, and here's Jean.
Thank you. So for starters, a big thank you to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science and the Denver American Indian Commission for having partnered with us for so many years to present this monthly Indigenous Film Festival. We couldn't do it without our partners, and we couldn't do it without our sponsors. We have two sponsors that help bring the series to you. The 2021 series sponsor is Mile High Behavioral Health, and Behavioral Health Care, and our media sponsor is Kuvo Jazz. So many thanks to them, and of course, thank you to everyone in the audience who's joining us tonight. As Celine said, we wanted to connect this film, Karlu Karlu, Devil's Marbles. We wanted to bring it to you in conjunction with the Stonehenge exhibit, because, you know, to the Western eye, we're kind of geared up to seeing constructed monuments as something special, but we don't always recognize a natural landscape as having a cultural and spiritual significance. And so Karlu Karlu really presents that perspective of a natural rock monument. I want to tell you, before we get into the film, I want to tell you a little bit about CAAMA, the Central Australian Aboriginal Media Association that produced this film. CAAMA was founded in 1980, owned by the Aboriginal people of Central Australia. And I'm going to read you from their mission statement. CAAMA is dedicated to the social, cultural, and economic advancement of Aboriginal people. It has a mandate to promote Aboriginal culture, language, dance, and music, while generating economic benefits in the form of training and employment. The association is responsible for a diverse range of media products that engender pride in Aboriginal culture and informs and educates the wider community of the richness and diversity of the Aboriginal peoples of Australia. So the first media that they were involved with was radio. And then somewhat after that, they created CAAMA Productions, and they were filming a whole range of different types of video. A lot of it was Aboriginal people telling stories to other Aboriginal people, teaching cultural traditions and techniques. And its main purpose really was to reach Aboriginal people in very rural areas. They used a satellite feed, and they wanted to make sure that their young people weren't inundated with media from Western cultures to the exclusion of media about their own cultures. So they had a very active video production operation for quite some time. We liked screening their films because they don't over direct their subjects. And so you have a chance to see Aboriginal people telling stories the way they tell stories. And nobody's telling, you know, cut and speed it up and editing out. And what you see in some of them, especially when they're teaching a technique, is they repeat things many, many times within, you know, their 30 minutes. And that's a feature of a lot of oral tradition. Because you know, your listener can't flip back, you know, and go back a page and reread. So, you know, they reinforce the stories and the techniques with repetition. As a result, these films don't get wide exposure. You're not going to see them in most film festivals because the, you know, people will say, you know, our audience, you know, wants, you know, pick up the pace here. It's one of the things that we actually like about Denver March Powwow. Denver March Powwow is a powwow for the participants and their families, and it's not put on as a tourist attraction where, you know, they speed things up. And, you know, I get the same sense when we're there as I do from watching CAAMA films. So without further ado, the film runs 21 minutes, and after the film, we will be back for some discussion. So let's roll Karlu Karlu. So Karlu Karlu, I hope you enjoyed the film. I would like to start the discussion by providing a little bit of the backstory to the monument to Dr. John Flynn. He was a local doctor. He founded a group called the Royal Flying Doctor Service that would fly out in small planes so they could get medical care to rural areas in Australia. He died in 1951, and his wife wanted to create a monument to him. So you saw the picture of the monument. It was his wife's idea that this should be adorned by a boulder. It would give it gravitas. And this is close to Alice Springs. And they searched around and she didn't find a rock that she considered suitable. So they kept going further and further afield until they got to Karlu Karlu, which is 400 kilometers away. And they saw a rock that they liked. They didn't ask anybody if they could have it, if they could take it, nothing. They just saw this rock, they liked it, they took it back, and they put it on the monument. So this was very distressing to the traditional owners of Karlu Karlu, and they wanted their rock back. It was also distressing to the Indigenous people in and around Alice Springs, where this monument was located, because these rocks are thought to have great spiritual power. And it was a dangerous thing to have this rock wrenched from Karlu Karlu and brought into their territory. So they had concerns. You saw some photographs of two rocks. What they ended up doing was the rock from Karlu Karlu was returned, and the Arenti people provided a rock from their area. So the monument would still have a boulder on it, and it would satisfy the wife, but it would also be an appropriate rock because it was a rock of the place. So not all of that comes out in the film. So there's the backstory. So he died, John Flynn died in 1951. They built this monument in 1952, and it was in the late 90s when the rock was finally returned to Karlu Karlu. So, Merle, I will turn the mic over to you.
Thank you.
For discussion.
Okay. I think this is about the fourth time I've seen this film. Every time I see it, you know, it's a 20-minute film, but there's a lot of stuff going on. When he says, he recounts the people of the place. He talks about the people who passed there, who are no longer there. His grandfather and his grandfather's father. And then he says he's the kind of the last guy there, except he has a grandson, a fat boy, we find out later. You know, he is, in a sense, setting up what the Maori call the whakapapa, the connections of his people to that place. He is, in that very subtle way, establishing his claim to that country. It reminds me of an anecdote that one of the, at that time, I think a land judge in New Zealand, Eddie Dury, he recounts a story of a Maori man who was challenging claiming his right to the river bottom. And they were in court, and he got up and he sang a song. And the judge at the end said, well, that was, it was very interesting, but all plaintiff did was sing a song. But it's through that song, and it's through that kind of recitation of the people who were there, in the case of Karlu Karlu, where people are establishing their historical claim to the land, to his country. I thought that was, it just struck me today that that's exactly what he was doing. And then toward the end, when he is talking to that young man and telling him that he has to work with Fat Boy, when he's gone, he could be hunting, but he also says, but I don't know where I'll be. He has established a kind of the transfer of power. That was, as we say back home, that was kind of a chicken skin moment there when I finally realized what was going on in that film. Very powerful, very, very powerful. I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not realizing it earlier. But anyway, okay. Now, he had been fighting for his country for a long time and to reclaim his country. But one of the reasons he didn't own his country is because of this fiction called terra nullius, that Australia was terra nullius. It was land belonging to no one, because essentially no one was there. But a gentleman, a fighter from the Torres Strait, he was a Torres Strait Islander, Eddie Mabo, M-A-B-O. He was one of several that disputed that fiction in the courts of Australia. And in 1992, the decision, the Mabo decision, overturned that fiction, that lie, that this was terra nullius, and it acknowledged that the Aboriginal Australians were there, and they had rights in those lands. And so they had a right to reclaim those lands. And so you had the Native Title Act in 1993, which enabled people like the gentleman in Karlu Karlu to formally regain or have their rights as landowners acknowledged. So that's part of the backstory as well. Now, I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and stone or rocks or pohaku play an important role in the Hawaiian culture as well. At a personal level, at kind of an ideological level, at an economic level, in many ways, stone, rock are significant components of the Hawaiian experience. I grew up in a Paoa Valley, P-A-U-O-A. Our 11,000 square feet lot bordered the Paoa stream. At one time, that valley was had a lot of taro, what we call taro patches. By the time we moved there was only one. There was only one. But you could see the remnants along the stream of some of those waterways that channel the water to the taro patch. And those were lined with stone. They were lined with stone. The river was dammed, not completely, but dammed such that the water level was raised so the water could flow into the taro patch. And one of the things I've always regretted it was that growing up as a young boy, I was also an ignorant young boy. And one of the things we did was build dams upstream of the taro farmers' dam. And we piled rocks, piled stones, and created a dam so we could go swimming. But in doing so, we basically deprived him of his water, and boy, he'd get mad and he would tear the thing down. And we just were so damn ignorant that we didn't understand what was going on. So there are also, so rocks play an important part, or stone, in agriculture, but also in fisheries as well. The kind of construction of fish ponds in Hawaii required tons of stone. And so what what rocks, what stone also mean to someone as a Hawaiian is the kind of cooperation, the kind of organization it took to move that rock to build the fish ponds. You see it today as those fish ponds in places like Heia are being restored. You see the line of people passing the rocks. You know, 100 yards and more of stone being moved. And so you look at the fish pond, you say it's fish, it's sustenance, it's stone, and it is about unity. It's about a common responsibility, a responsibility for each other, and the kind of cooperation an organization it requires to do something like that. So it's stone or rock has a lot of meaning, more than just kind of geological. There are, I think, 3 or 4 large stones on Waikiki Beach that you can see even today. And those are the kapimahu. Those are the stones that commemorate the arrival of 4 powerful kahuna from Tahiti, who came to the islands of Hawaii. And they were the 3rd gender, they were Mahu. And even today, you will see those stones adorned with flowers, with lei, flower garlands, because they are held as and treated as a sacred site. And one of the things that is especially irksome about tourism in Hawaii, although it provides a foundation to economics of the island, there's not enough sensitivity to the sacredness of these sacred places. And so you see people climbing over these stones. They are climbing over the birthing stones where royalty gave birth. The ali'i gave birth. And they climb over that, and they treat that as a backdrop for selfies. And there's something very off-putting to Hawaiians about that kind of attitude, and it's sometimes very difficult to get that level of sacrality or sacredness transfer to tourists who are there for a good time. We see people who go to these ancient heiau, temples, if you will, and again, they are cavorting and treating these sites because they look more natural. They don't look like the Cathedral Notre Dame in Paris. So it's pretty much an extension of the beach and not a sacred place. So with that, can we see?
We'll see some questions. Okay, so a couple of things. One comment, but it's such a lovely comment. Through song and story, we know who we are. Somebody has forgiven you for your ignorance. It says appreciates hearing you weaving your childhood ignorance together with your wisdom today. So you somehow redeemed yourself. We have a question. Does the land trust pass ownership of the land to future descendants?
Yeah, I mean, it is, those lands are inalienable. They can be leased. So you have mining leases, you have, in the case of Karlu Karlu, they've got an arrangement, I don't know if it's the local government or provincial government or the national government, but we've got national parks that are owned by traditional owners, but used by government entities, by private industry, including extractive industry. Up in the Northern Territory, every couple of years they have a huge bilateral military exercise with the U.S. and the Australian military that they use on traditional lands. Interestingly, the United States military agrees to some very, very strict environmental rules about cleaning up as they use the place, about restoring the land after they leave. And I would love to see the same kind of attitude adopted by the U.S. military in places like Pohakuloa training area on the Big Island of Hawaii, where there's not the cleanup requirements, the environmental requirements, the cultural protection requirements are not as stringent as they are in with the Ministry of Defense and the traditional owners in Australia.
So we have another comment here with regard to what Merv is saying. I'm sure others are also thinking of the climbing culture in the West and how they see some rock formations as recreational.
Yeah, and see, if we take the Bear Butte, it is recreational. It is on public lands. These are lands held sacred by several tribes. But these are federal lands, public lands. And the public lands are open to multiple use. And right now, there's no way of saying for the Bureau of Land Management or the National Park Service, so you can't use this because the tribes are having their ceremonies. They can recommend that you not engage in those recreational activities at certain times, but in a sense, there's no way of enforcing that. So it calls for understanding and respect, but it's not mandatory.
So I'm scrolling through to see if we have other questions. Someone noted actually in the logging in that it actually been to Karlu Karlu.
Yeah.
So I was glad to have somebody who'd been there see the film. They have the traditional owners have a lease arrangement with the state, so it's open as, again, a public access, but they have a lot of requirements. You can take kind of self-guided tours, and they with instruction to stay on the paths and not to wander where you're not supposed to wander. You can't bring dogs in, but I think they do allow camping, so it's a fairly accessible site. Although I'm speculating here, but I'm assuming that it's huge. The area of these boulders it's a huge area, so it may not be all of that area that's open to the public. So we have a few more minutes here. If you have another question,
Well, let me.
type it in.
I don't know if people are familiar with this story, but one of the interesting things that occurs on a regular basis, I don't know how often it happens, but it's on a regular basis at the Volcano National Park on the Big Island of Hawaii, is they will get FedEx, UPS, or via the US Postal Service a package with lava rock from the volcano, because people have taken them all over the world. And the story is that if you take the rock from the volcano, Madame Pele is going to be unhappy and will visit upon you all manner of misfortune and hardship. And I guess for some people that has happened. And so they sent that lava rock back and said, please take it out of our hands and lift the curse.
If it hasn't happened to them, they've Googled and found out it happened to somebody. They want to get that rock back before it's too late.
Oh, wait. That's an interesting question. Okay, on the need to.
Are you doing this one?
No, the one
We
about.
gotta read it, so people.
Well, please comment on how people of settler mentality want to have their names engraved on the rocks, where the people who know rocks as sentient are insulted and horrified by the practice. That's something people have done for historically. I know in World War II, it was the Kilroy was here. You can go into some caves and some tunnels that were fortifications during the First World War, and you will see the names of soldiers there in their hometowns. I'm not sure why it is that is I can't comment on the need, I mean, the reasons behind the need to do that. I kind of like the idea of, tread lightly and take photos and draw pictures or capture those images in your mind. But there's a compelling need for people to say, I was here. And I don't know it is to say, I conquered this place, or I did something wonderful and let me celebrate how wonderful it was. I just can't figure it out.
Okay, another question here. Why does the film speaker use mixed language rather than just native language? Why is he considered the only one left of his tribe? Is the leadership patriarchal?
Yeah.
Is Karlu Karlu considered sacred just because the rocks are round and therefore considered unusual? As far as language, I mean, that's probably, there's, with contact with outsiders, you get into that mix, and sometimes there's words that they don't translate well from English into the native language.
Yeah, I mean, when he's talking to the young man, I mean, to me, it's kind of obvious that the young man doesn't speak the language or is not fluent in the language. And so he has to speak to him in kind of a hybrid.
I did some, I used to do some legal work for a tribe, and if I'd be presenting to the tribal council, everyone on the tribal council was bilingual. And so they could go into executive session, they could exclude me by just switching language, and I didn't have to leave the room. They didn't have to leave the room. It was just a language switch. But every now and then there'd be a word like spreadsheet, that I would hear in the mix, because there was no word for spreadsheet. Is Karlu Karlu considered sacred just because the rocks are round and therefore unusual?
It's the story of that giant who came. I mean, that's
right.
It is that hair shirt. I mean,
The hair rope that he was making. But that is only one of the stories of the place. And that is a story that they're willing to share with outsiders. But there are many, many stories about that place that aren't shared outside.
That's right.
And so why it's considered sacred is beyond anyone telling you if they're not, from within that community. Actually, several language groups that consider that place sacred because those stories aren't shared. And he's not saying he's the only one left of his tribe. He's saying he's the only one left of his cohort. The old guy, the elders, they've died. And so he's the last of basically his generation of leaders. Right. So he's, it's that idea of time to pass the torch.
Right.
To younger generations. Well, we've hit the 8 o'clock mark. Do you have any last words you want to share before we say our thank yous?
Well, just thanks, folks, for joining us in this film. I hope you took as much from this film as I did, and I just, God, this is a damn powerful movie.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah.
Some other folks in the audience thought it was pretty good as well. Yeah, and we've had a number of films from CAAMA that we've screened over the years, and we're coming up to our 18th annual film festival. So we've had the opportunity to screen a lot of film, and I like what CAAMA produced. They're quiet films, but they're deep, and there's a lot in them. And for me, it's a refreshing change from some of the the fast pace that we get with commercial production. Yeah, there's a lot there. So our thanks to the museum, as always, for hosting us. Our thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us and for your thoughtful questions. Appreciate that. Next month, the second Wednesday of October is the 13th, and that will kick off our 2021 Indigenous Film and Arts Festival. So we hope you will join us. Stay tuned. However you get your information, from my emails or the Film Festival Facebook page or the DMNS website, it'll be everywhere.
Absolutely. Thank you both for a wonderful discussion. As always, that film was indeed very powerful, Merv. And hearing you all discuss it and put a little bit of your personal experience and meaning and connection with it was beautiful. So thank you both. And thank you to everybody who joined us. We'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.